Hey everyone, I want to welcome you to the Driver Trainer channel. Before I get started, be sure to like and subscribe to the channel because I'm going to be dropping some more videos. In fact, on this video today, this is going to be one of 5 topics I'm going to discuss regarding defensive driving, and I'm going to discuss topic 1 with you on this video, and I plan tomorrow to drop topic 2 as well as 3, 4, and 5 throughout the rest of the week. So you don't want to miss those videos because it's going to be some great information that you are really going to enjoy. We can all agree that driving is something we do, but it's also a huge responsibility. And the truth is, most situations on the road can be avoided if you just know what to look for. Now, as far as the not at fault collisions that occur regularly, you'd be surprised how many can actually be prevented by either driver. And whether the other driver doesn't care to prevent a collision and cause a preventable on his end, you'd be surprised how well and how easily you can prevent most collisions. And I'm sure many of you are out there saying, I've almost had this collision the other day because this other driver did this and that, blah, blah, blah. And everybody has war stories like that from their experience of driving. And I'm sure some of you have been involved in collisions where you're thinking, what could have I done better? What could have I done to maybe get out of that situation? And I'm sure many of you have thought that in your mind. Even though it may not be your fault or you feel like you did what you could, you're probably thinking, what could have I done? And that's the multi-million-dollar question running through many of your heads. Well, my videos are going to help you prevent a lot of these collisions that may possibly be avoidable. Now, I will say not every collision is 100% avoidable on your end. There are some one-offs that you can't avoid 100%. And it's unfortunate. And the only way to make those avoidable is to get the other parties on board with this program. And if you are in that position where you've had a preventable collision that you were at fault of, and you wish you could have done better to not have that collision in the first place, I'm going to help you as well. So stay tuned. We're going to get right into it, folks. So let's start out with this question. Why does safe driving matter? Now, if I were to ask this question in person to everybody who's watching, I'm sure I'd get a variety of responses, and that's reasonable because every time you drive, you're making a decision that affects lives. And most collisions, like I said, are preventable with the right habits because safe driving is not just about following the rules, which that is important, but it's also about awareness, anticipation, and space management. And today's focus is going to be practical techniques to help you stay in control and avoid danger. Now, what is the foundation of defensive driving? Safe drivers share these 5 common habits. Number 1, they look ahead, not just nearby. They also stay aware of their surroundings. They also continuously scan for risks. They also maintain their space and always have an escape option in their mind. And they also communicate their intentions clearly with others. So what are the core safe driving techniques that we want to practice? We're going to look at 5 core techniques this week. And that first one we are going to look at today is you want to be looking far ahead while you're driving. So today we're going to talk about one of the most important habits you can build as a driver, and that's learning to look farther down the road. That's part of looking ahead. Now, why does it matter to look far ahead? The honest truth is most drivers look too close to their vehicles and the vehicles in front of them, but they don't look further out, which is what looking far ahead actually means. So it's not just the car in front of you, but you're scanning at least 10 to 15 seconds down the road. I mean, if you can look a little further, that'd be great. But if you're doing at least 10 seconds, 12 seconds down the road, and what I mean by the timing, if you understand following distance, in driver's ed, they taught you, say, the 2-second or 3-second following distance. You're looking at the guy in front of you, and you're counting 1,000, 2, 1,000, and however many seconds before you approach a fixed point that driver ahead of you passes. Well, it's the same concept, except you're not using this in this aspect for following distance. You're using this technique to determine where your distance vision needs to be, which is further down the road, at least 10 seconds, 12 seconds, 15 seconds. So that way, not only are you looking at what's going on in front of you immediately, but you're also looking further ahead to anticipate problems before you approach those such issues. Because when you do that, you're watching the overall traffic pattern, not just one object in front of you. So in other words, you're not watching just the bumper right ahead, but you're reading the road ahead. You're looking for what's developing, not just what's happening right now. Why does it matter? Well, you want to connect distance to time and safety. Now, I'm not going to go into the math of how that works because most of you probably don't want to wrap your head around that unless you're a math genius. And trust me, I'm not a math genius. I mean, I do the best I can with the math training I have from my public school days, and that's helping me to survive in my lifetime. But anyhow, what I'm getting to is the more distance you have, the more time you have to react. And the more time you have to react, that's less panic, which means smoother driving, and it also prevents sudden braking because you know things are going to happen before you approach them. Whereas you have close vision, you have late reaction, far vision equals early decisions. So the earlier you see something, the more options you have, but the later you see it, your options are down to next to nothing, to be honest with you and be frank with you. So what do you look for down the road when you're looking ahead? When you're looking far down the road, let me give you an idea of how you would want to drive. You don't have to speak this out loud when you're driving, but just think in your head. You're driving down the road. Okay, let me look ahead. I see, and this is basically calling out various things like, okay, I see brake lights coming up ahead about half a mile up the street. I don't see a traffic light or a stop sign. Maybe we're in a situation where something's going on. We need to get ready to stop. How about a changing traffic light? I'm sure many of you have seen this where the light is green, it's green, it's green. You get up there and then the light turns yellow and people do one of two things. They either react real quick with that brake pedal or they just go for it, and sometimes that light turns red just as their front tires cross the stop bar or just before it. Now legally your front tires must cross the stop bar before the light turns red. But do we want to push it to where I think I can make it, and then be on the border of whether you make it or not, you don't make it, and then you all of a sudden you find yourself getting a ticket. Now, my recommendation for traffic lights is when you see a traffic light that we call a stale green light, and this isn't just limited to these stale green lights, but what a stale green light is, for many of you who may be hearing this term for the first time, a stale green light is just a green light that's been green for quite a while. And typically a stale green light is eventually going to change. It's like almost the law of electronic physics. It's just randomly going to change. And most of you will agree, yeah, that sounds about right. It's just the way it always works. So what we want to do is we want to start slowing down, maybe 3 to 5 mile an hour below the speed limit or whatever your target speed is on that particular road. Just bring your speed down a few miles an hour. That way when the light does turn yellow, you're not reacting to stop. You're able to stop. Now, it's not going to be flawless that you're going to avoid a hard brake. As some situations, you may have to, that's what it is. But I would not try to beat the light and then you risk hitting the stop bar after the light turns red and you find yourself on the side of the road with officer friendly and a nice carbon copy slip of paper. That's what you find yourself getting when you make that attempt to try to beat the light and you miss it. Folks, let's not do that. You say no cops, no stops, then you find out after you run the red light, oh, I didn't see you, officer, because he was probably hiding in the woods waiting for somebody to run a red light. So we want to be smart. We want to stop at the red lights so that way we avoid collisions and we avoid tickets, which saves us money. Also, we want to watch for intersections and cross traffic. Intersections can be several of the dangerous things out on the road because you have cross traffic that come across your direction as well as you coming across their direction just like that. Now, typically on most streets, you have some sort of control, whether you have the right of way and they have a stop sign, or it's a four-way stop, or if it's a traffic light. We want to be ready for anything that could happen at those intersections, especially when somebody approaches the intersection and they're coming in real hot. You never want to second guess, yeah, they're going to stop. They're just the type of person that races up, stops at the last minute. No, we don't want to assume that. We always want to assume the worst, because you assume the best and the worst happens, then what? If you assume the worst and it's a nothing burger, better safe than sorry. If you were to assume the worst and the worst does occur, then you are in a better position to react to that situation and you'll be better off in the long run because you'll be well prepared and you'll be ready to stop without putting super duper faith into your brakes, hoping that your brakes will do what they need to do. How about pedestrians near the road? I'm seeing this quite a bit in cities. You'll have your roadway with a sidewalk, or sometimes you'll have a strip of grass, then a sidewalk, and yet where do the pedestrians decide they want to walk at? Right on the curb. Why they do that, I would love to know. And I'm sure everybody else would love to know. So we need to watch out for pedestrians near the road. And when I approach situations like that, I like to move over a little bit if I can safely do so and try to leave a sufficient path between me and the pedestrian so that way there's no risk of them, say, accidentally darting out, especially if there's two people walking abreast, meaning they're walking side by side and they're laughing and giggling, not paying attention, and then something in their conversation catches them off guard and and then makes to the point where they jump out into your path of travel. Then you're in a position where we have problems. And that day can go real sour real quick. So I always suggest leave them a few feet of buffer zone. So that way, if something does happen, you have time to react, or you're also far enough away from them that they're not going to get into your path of travel right away. And if you get the pedestrian that just kind of wanders around like something's not right with him and he starts going your direction, at least you have that buffer zone, you have time to react. Or if he's doing it as you're about to approach him, you're probably going to be past him before he gets in your path of travel. No harm, no foul. And even the sidewalks that are right up at the street, instead of the roadways where you have the grassy strip before the sidewalk, you still want to be careful with pedestrians on those sidewalks. Because the same thing I just described a minute ago can happen just as easily on those type of sidewalks. Now, typically municipalities want that grassy strip before the sidewalk, but many times your wider roadways, like your multi-lane roadways, tend to be right at the edge because once upon a time, there probably was a setup where it was a grassy strip, then the sidewalk, and then the street needed to be widened, and sometimes they were widened to 4-lane real tight, and it's so tight that you have two tractor trailers next to each other, and the two rear view mirrors are this close, and too many things happen, and the city said, okay, we need to widen that out. So then they use that grassy strip, basically rob Peter to pay Paul in their construction project to make it wider. Or sometimes they need to add a center turn lane or whatever they need to add. And sometimes they even widen it further out than where the original sidewalk was, that they now need eminent domain to take people's front yards away. The residents of those streets are only going to tolerate so much before they say, wait a minute, I don't want to give up all my front yard. And so there's limitations there. Therefore, they have to do with what they have. And that's why you have sidewalks that are set up that way. So you just want to be careful in those areas with pedestrians. And also at night, if you're on a multi-lane roadway in town, now don't do this on the expressway. By law, you must use the right-hand lane unless you're passing on the expressway. But in town, as long as you're maintaining the posted speed limit, you can use the left lane. And I would highly recommend using the left lane at night where pedestrians are prominent. Because I've heard of stories where people would be driving down the roadway, then all of a sudden at night they hit a pedestrian or they brush up against a pedestrian. And I have a friend of mine that did accidentally bump into a pedestrian at night in that situation where the pedestrian told her, okay, I'm not hurt, blah, blah, blah. Then, of course, that pedestrian called the police, reported a hit and run, and she had to explain herself. And I can't remember what happened in the long run, but after that, she learned a lesson. I made this suggestion to her that I always use the left lane. And she says, yeah, that's what I started doing after that situation. So I'm glad she made that decision. Lesson learned. Luckily, nothing happened to where her driver's license became at risk or whatever. At night, you're in a residential area or in a inner city area where there's a lot of pedestrians potentially. I would just use the left lane, avoid all problems there. And if it's dark enough to where you can't see, always use your high beams. Just remember to shut them off when you have oncoming traffic so you don't blind them. Then that way you can catch pedestrians a lot quicker. Also, vehicles merging or turning. You want to watch out for vehicles that are merging. Now on the expressway, the law is anybody merging the onus is on them to merge, not the vehicle that's already traveling on the roadway, especially on expressways. Now, if it's bumper to bumper or it's really congested, in those situations, you need to do what's called the zipper method, where one car goes in after the other, and then that's a smooth transition, because otherwise, there's no way people are going to get in properly, especially if traffic is moving at a snail's pace. And then that also keeps traffic from backing up at the other end of the on-ramp. And vehicles turning, you want to make sure they're turning, they're going into the correct lane. Like you're driving down the road in the right lane, they turn out in front of you, make maybe a right turn where they're supposed to be turning into the right lane on a right turn. You want to be careful with that. I mean, they may turn and then go into the left lane, which is technically illegal everywhere. You still want to be mindful of that and make sure you're ready to have an escape plan in the event that they do turn in front of you. So you want to be careful with that. Also, road conditions, construction sites. You want to be paying attention to those signs. When it says road construction ahead, and they'll put signs up saying road construction ahead, then the next sign will always be left lane closed ahead or right lane closed ahead. Then after that, you have the two lines, and they're always orange signs, as opposed to the traditional yellow signs. They're always going to be orange, which clearly means it's construction. But you have the road construction ahead sign, you have your whatever lane ends, then you have your two sticks with one that bends over, depending on which lane is merging over. Then after that, you have your zipper points, where everybody should be zippered in right before that point, usually after that sign with the two sticks. That's where people need to start merging and doing the zipper method, not 5 feet from the barricades that are angling out to the next lane. That's too little too late. So we want to be careful with that in construction zones. Also, curves. We're going around a curve, we need to adjust our speed accordingly. If you're in a 55 mile an hour speed zone and there's a sign with a curve and it says 35 mile an hour, now obviously a regular car, or a four-wheeler as most people refer to a regular car, can maybe drive a little faster. Usually the advisory speed, if you're in a large commercial vehicle, that's usually the speed where you want to be, or in some cases 5 miles below that. A car, usually right at that speed, maybe 5 above, depending on what kind of suspension you have. And I would not be pushing it any more than that. You should be adjusting your speed and then increasing the speed as you complete the turn and go into a straight motion. Now, you do want to watch out for curves where there's more than one curve. So it's curving this way, then curving back this way, and you want to watch out for that. You don't want to speed back up. Oh, we got another curve. Or the ones that gradually turn, they just turn, and you're sitting there thinking, when is this going to end? Now, of course, those are usually meant for higher speed turns, but you still want to watch your speed, maybe drop the speed, maybe 5 mile an hour less if need be. Now, those are far and few between, but they are out there, and you want to be mindful of that. Also, debris on the road. You know, somebody loses their ladder off their work truck. I've seen that a few times. Or the tractor trailer that has a trailer tire blowouts. Or he doesn't have a blowout, but instead he loses the recap, because most of those tires do get recapped. And then you have this big piece of black gator, as we call it, out on the road. And the term gator is rightfully so, because if you were to run over it, it'll eat up your car like an alligator. So you want to be careful with any kind of debris. You don't want to just run over any random debris, but you want to be ready for it. And as far as running it over, well, it's a McDonald's bag. What could be in there besides a hamburger wrapper? Well, anything. Who says somebody threw it out their window after eating lunch? What if a contractor put nails in it to take to a job site and it fell off his work truck? Guess what's going to happen? Yes, you guessed it. You'll be up on the side of the road pulling the spare tire out. So the whole point is you're just trying to spot clues. You know, brake lights way ahead, traffic backing up, a light that's about to change, anything that tells you what's coming next. That's what you're looking for when you're looking far ahead. So what happens when drivers don't put all this into practice? Here's what they end up doing. They end up with hard braking, which eventually results in rear-end collisions. They also overreact to where they cause more problems. They get caught off guard. And the list goes on and on and on. And here's a scenario. You've probably seen people who slam down their brakes at the last second. That usually happens because they were only looking one car ahead instead of seeing the slowdown coming earlier. And there are some of you that may have seen slowdown sooner. You've prepared for it, looked in your rearview mirror, and here comes this guy coming real quick and oh! Because he was not looking far enough ahead like you were. And if I had a dime for every time that's happened to me, I'd be a multi-zillionaire. It's too bad life just doesn't work that way. I wish it would. So how do you put this skill to practice? This is the best thing I would do. Pick a point far down the road and keep scanning toward it. Don't stare at it, but scan towards it as you're also moving your eyes back to what's closer and what's around you, but also keep constant scan at that position up ahead. In fact, you want to put your head on a swivel. You want to be checking your mirrors. You want to be checking your dashboard as well as what's ahead of you immediately and what's ahead of you down the road. And you want to be rotating that every 5 to 8 seconds through that process of checking your mirror, checking the mirror. So your head's right here. You're looking at what's immediately in front of you. You're scanning up ahead, checking your mirror, scanning up ahead, check your other mirror, scanning ahead, looking at your speedometer, scanning ahead, while still keeping your eyes on what's in front of you. And that helps you to keep your head on a swivel, and that allows you to catch things better. And as you're looking up ahead, you want to ask yourself, what's happening up there? As you check far ahead, and then bring your eyes back. But don't ignore what's close. Always balance your near and far vision, because it's not about ignoring what's in front of you. It's all about expanding how far ahead you're thinking, as well as looking at what's in front of you at the same time. Now, how can I apply this to different driving situations to make it practical for everyday driving? Well, in city driving, you want to be watching intersections and lights, as well as pedestrians and sudden stops like we just talked about. And highway driving, you want to look much further ahead due to the speed being higher, because typically in town, you're doing about 30 miles an hour, maybe faster, whereas on the highway, you're doing 55 or more. Because if there's a slowdown on the highway, you definitely want to spot those much sooner as opposed to in town, because your speed is much higher. That way you definitely have more time to stop. And on the highway, you do want to watch traffic patterns, not just vehicles. And that same goes for in-town driving. Here's the key takeaway point I want to leave you with. This is all about thinking ahead, not reacting late. And let me put it this way. Good drivers react. Great drivers anticipate. Let me say that again. Good drivers react. Great drivers anticipate. So you want to be able to anticipate what's coming up ahead before you approach that situation. So if you can master this one habit of looking far ahead, you'll be ahead of most drivers on the road. We want to drive with purpose, not just habit. The goal is not just to react, but to anticipate and avoid problems before they happen. Now, in the next video, we're going to talk about how to be aware of our surroundings. So be sure to like and subscribe because you don't want to miss the next video. And be safe out there. Thank you.